Good day, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting session of the Intelligent Automation World Series. My name is Rochelle Hood, and for those of you who are just joining for the first time in the World Series, I serve as SSON's Global Head of Customer Analytics and Research. But even more exciting for me this week, I get to chair this entire event. I'll be moderating today's sessions with a really esteemed speaker that I can't wait to introduce you to. But first, let me walk you through a couple of logistics to make sure that this is the best experience it can be and that you can get some useful information to carry on after this session. On your audience view screen on the left-hand side, you're going to see a Q&A box. You'll use that for two ways. First of all, if you have any technical issues with the platform, or in the event that something isn't quite working, you don't know how to do something to hear the session, put that note in there, and Ashley, who's providing technical support, will get right back to you. Also, if you have any questions related to the conference as a whole, Ashley can assist you with any of those questions also. And then, additionally, and as is important, please put any comments or questions you'd like me to pose to our presenter today. We're going to queue those all up, and once the content presentation is done, we'll have a chance for audience questions at that point. But just send them in early and often because we'll get them all queued up. You don't need to wait till the end. And then next, we always like to give you a little bonus even when you come to a digital conference, so don't feel like you went home with nothing. Right from the corner of your desk, you're going to get two more interesting resources. First of all, I know a lot of you are going to ask us right away, can I get a copy of the slide deck? Well, it's right out there for you available in the resource list that we refer to as our digital gift bag. There's a lot of good content and comments and examples and stuff, and you'll see in these slides a lot of things to think about you'll probably want to take back, reflect on, and probably share amongst your team. So please feel free to download that slide deck. Also listed in there, there's a YouTube link to, many of you may be following the amazing stuff that's been coming out of the World Economic Forum and their annual meeting. There's a video with a number of global leaders about leadership, and one of the comments that they make in that video and in part of that discussion is going to be something that our presenter is going to bring into this discussion today. So you can listen to the entire YouTube video by just clicking on that link right there. And then lastly, the other thing I wanted to point out is over on the right-hand side of your screen where you see the speaker bio, and you see Suhir's information, his full bio if you use the little arrow to click down. Right below his smiling face, you're also going to see social buttons and ways of connecting, websites, emails, and LinkedIn. Don't let the conversation end just here. This is just like getting someone's business card at the side of the stage or connecting with them in an event app. Please use that button and keep the conversation going. We learn a lot from these peer networkings and peer collaborations, so please feel free to do that. And you'll also see my picture and LinkedIn post down below should you have any questions, comments, or feedback about this session or anything in the entire Intelligent Automation World Series. So I'm delighted to welcome Sudhir to the stage today. He actually came referred to me. We have a long-term partnership with a number of people who have spent some time and have served in leadership roles at Becton Dickinson. He was the site manager for, site director, for Poland, and with that role, there was more of 18 years of shared services leadership, including Hewlett-Packard and a number of other positions. But really, this has given him a perspective on working in Singapore, China, Poland, Romania, many different areas, and help understand the people aspect of all of what we need to do from a transformation perspective and all of the things that are going on as a result of these automation changes. He's moved into some very interesting new work that we'll talk a little bit about how this culture of innovation, he's done a deeper study of it with his Mindful Solutions role. And so with all of that, I'll open that into our dialogue and bring that into the examples. So Sudhir, it's really my pleasure to welcome you to the digital stage, and now over to you.
Thank you so much, Rochelle, for that very flattering introduction. Really appreciate that. And thank you very much for everyone who's dialed into this session. Really appreciate making time for this. So I'd like to begin by kind of calling out something which most of you are already aware of, that about 80% of the business services jobs are expected to be transformed over the next 6-year period. So by 2025, most of our work content, what we do ourselves as leaders, as well as what our employees do in the centers, will be radically changed. So the question which comes across to most of the leaders It's essentially, would you like to kind of catch play up in order, or play catch up to kind of get to where some of the pioneers of these changes lead to? Or would you like to lead the change from the front? Or even better yet, would you like your employees to lead this change from the front? And that is essentially what culture of innovation can help to get you, to kind of truly drive innovation, adapt some of the market trends into your ecosystem in a quick and fast fashion. That's what primarily culture of innovation is all about. So any conversation about implementing a culture would typically take quite a bit of time. So we'll try to squeeze as much as possible in the next 16 minutes, wherein which my expectation will be I'll get you adequately excited about this journey, that you will start researching more about this and you will try to explore this field so that you can incorporate a lot of this style of culture within your own organization. I would also like to hope that you will get some quick wins today, which you are able to immediately roll out into your organizations in a faster pace. So what we will cover is essentially to align a little bit about what is culture of innovation, look at shared services and outsourcing industry a little bit deeply, to look at where we are today as well as our technology horizon. We will talk a little bit about why it makes sense to run a culture of innovation and why it's a good time to do it now, followed by who plays a part in this journey, as well as how this journey would evolve in different organizations. Towards the end, we'll talk through some practical hurdles and other considerations and leave some time for questions. So that's the plan. So let's kind of jump right in. So what is a culture of innovation? So let's be aligned on the basics. So culture of innovation is essentially when innovative thinking becomes a cultural trait. So many a times, we are used to working on organizational cultures and what it means and so on. So I'm not going to dig deeper into cultural trait, but it's good for us to be aligned on what essentially is innovative thinking. So innovative thinking is essentially being able to relate to big problems and challenges in one's own ecosystem and feeling empowered to solve it. So there are two things which is critical here. One is that employees or people working in an organization should feel that they're able to relate to these big problems and that they can engage to those problems personally. And at the same time, they have adequate tools and so on and are empowered to do something about it. So being engaged is required and being empowered is the second requirement. It is quite interesting that we are talking about this in SSON forum today, given that in the most recent report published by SSON on a survey conducted in Europe, it came out that innovative thinking is the most sought after talent constraint in the region. About 44% of the respondents responded that that's one of the biggest lack which they face in the talent ecosystem today, higher than most other challenges. So it's quite a tall order for us to kind of consider rolling out a culture of innovation and innovative thinking as a cultural trait in SSOs, given that there is such a big challenge of having or attracting this kind of behavior within the organization. So to the question, is it possible to do? Of course it's possible to do. It is possible when the leadership is able to nurture the following aspects. So the expectation should be set that every member of the organization has innovation as a core responsibility and is empowered with the required knowledge, methodology, and tools. So that's when a true culture of innovation would come across. So as leaders, most of us who is participating in this session, we should be kind of committed to hold every member of our organization responsible to have innovation as a core responsibility. So it covers all the way from the reception staff, the people who are in the mailroom, who are processing transactions in the workflow, the frontline managers, everybody. Everybody should be having innovation as a core responsibility. And when I say core responsibility, it is not kind of agreeing with the person that that person would do a Kaizen project by end of the fiscal year or anything like that. This has to be measured and tracked almost on a daily or weekly basis. That's each individual is contributing towards the innovation agenda of the team and of the broader organization. And when I talk about being empowered, I think a lot of employees in shared services ecosystem typically feel helpless, that they are a small part of the big organization and they're not able to do much. This is where it's important for the organization to start giving them more broader knowledge, that is, share more of the business context, give more insight into the end-to-end processes and so on, enable them with the right methodologies. We have always used some methodologies like Six Sigma, 5 Whys and so on in the past, but there are more emerging methodologies such as design thinking and agile methodologies coming from the IT world and so on, which can be applied into shared services ecosystem. So we should actively bring these methodologies into our operating world. And we have so many exciting tools which we spoke about over the last couple of days here that we can open up to our own employee base. So these are the 3 traits leadership should try and focus on, which is driving every member of the organization to have a core responsibility around innovation and empowering them. That sounds very good and fancy. So how will that translate into a shared services ecosystem? So where are we today? We have highly underutilized workforce potential in shared services organizations. A typical employee in the hub locations is a graduate or a postgraduate. They come with very diverse range of education backgrounds. I've met people who come from biology, chemistry, science, statistics, languages, humanities, all kind of very varied backgrounds. They come and work together with us here in shared services locations. Do we truly utilize all that broad capabilities which they have, or do we get them to do very, very prescriptive tasks? Unfortunately, we do get them to do very prescriptive tasks. And the other facet of our employee base is that a majority of them are already millennials, and Generation C, which is the next generation, they're already starting to join in many of the locations already. And one thing which is common with all of them, they are all digital natives. They are highly tech adept. They can do quite a good magic with technology, and they do a lot of technology active engagement in their personal lives, be it downloading extremely popular games like Fortnite, which has 40 million users in a matter of few weeks, or engaging in conversations in Reddit and so on, as well as applying many other consumer technology in their lives. So they're highly tech adept, and they come with a great educational background in very varied fields. So we are sitting on true gold mine of human potential in the centers. But the bad news is that the real picture is not very rosy. We have highly disengaged workforce and concerns around attrition across all locations. Because when I started this journey, we were considering an attrition of about 5% to be a stretch attrition. But now in many corners of the world, an attrition of 20% is taken for granted as normal. So attrition is a major concern in this industry. And it's not a surprise given that a lot of the work which we get our employees to do is highly scripted and transactional work, which kind of disengages the employees to a large extent. So I'd like to kind of leave a news flash here that if you have highly scripted work and measure employees' productivity based on how well they adhere to the script, you cannot expect innovative thinking. That's kind of an oxymoron. So innovative thinking and scripted work adherence typically does not go together. So now we have a great opportunity that with more of automation coming through, can we get some of the scripted work out so that we can actively engage our employees into more creative and innovative work. Similarly, the other concern in the most hub locations are that the job roles in the centers are extremely commoditized, which means AP clerk or accounts payable processor is quite similar whichever company you go in a particular city. It's very, very commoditized job roles, which kind of encourages people to keep job hopping to different organizations for very silly reasons. Sometimes they are job hopping because the new company has better health club, or because one of their friends went to that company and they like to work with that friend, so he also wants to kind of follow the person to the other company. So job hopping is a reality in many hub locations because organizations or the centers are not highly distinguished between one another. So with culture of innovation and the times ahead, we have a true opportunity to unlock our potential of our employees and get them into a spiral of what I call as innovative thinking. Once they get hooked into it, it keeps growing and growing. So it's great to kind of get them into the spiral of innovative thinking and start getting them exposed into the enterprise level problems, the big problems which I mentioned earlier. So SSOs typically have great insight into the whole organization. So it's great for us to kind of expose them to the bigger problems of the organization and engage them into innovative thinking and focus on solving many of these problems. And looking a little bit on the technology horizon, so a lot of interesting digital tools are coming up in our horizon. We spoke about it over the last 3 days in this intelligent automation series. In this context, I think it's highly promising. You're moving away from old restrictions of big ERP solutions and so on. So we have a lot of interesting fields of digital solutions which are already available for us. And one place which is still kind of quite mystical is what we call as artificial intelligence, with different levels of machine learning associated to that. So it's promising that some of the solution providers on the left are already starting to apply machine learning, but the true benefit of artificial intelligence comes once we move further down into the areas such as deep learning, which is where a lot of the real value of artificial intelligence is expected to come out. That said, we can also start seeing that some refined modules of deep learning are already being commercialized and coming into our ecosystem, wherein which we can start applying some of those modules into our real-world enterprise issues, such as computer vision becoming a lot more preferred option than OCR, natural language processing helping digital assistants, the opportunity of digital assistants to be going much further. And fast AI is essentially one of the new measures wherein which it's a model of learning by which deep learning results can be kind of democratized into the broader world and so on. There's a lot of interesting things happening in this field. While many organizations are approaching this field in a very measured way with few partners and few consultants to trying to help us figure this out, what if you can truly open up this and get your own workforce to start connecting the dots here and try to drive some truly earth-shattering innovations within your ecosystem. So that is the promise of culture of innovation. So get this entire ecosystem within your employee base and crowdsource solutions from your own employees who know your ecosystem very well. As we established earlier, they're all highly tech adept. Kind of get them excited about some of these technologies. Some of them are already excited about these technologies. So give them an opportunity to play around with this in the workspace. Empower them with some of the classic process improvement methodologies, as well as new methodologies like design thinking, and open up the innovative ecosystem. That's one true opportunity which we have in front of us. So I can call out some examples in this space. One of the teams where we worked with a couple of years ago, we kind of exposed to them, to the operations employees, some of the areas where we are starting to invest in as a company. And they did some workshops and came out with one very, very unique solution, which was highly appreciated across the organization. This solution required 6 different tools to be kind of changed together to kind of bring a true end-to-end solution. So it required OCR, RPA, smart workflows, process mining, some SAP scripting, and so on, all added in together to bring a great empowering solution which the employees at the shop floor level were able to put together. So that was extremely motivating for us because there was no consultant or no individual tool vendor who would have came in and given us such a powerful solution. Just by exposing all these options to our employees, they were able to kind of connect things in a very intuitive fashion and give us very smart solutions. So that was extremely powerful, and we really appreciated that. So moving further, so this is one of the biggest advantages of moving into innovation-based culture. Some of the other benefits I just mentioned about converging the solutions as well as crowdsourcing it, it also becomes a very hands-on approach by all employees, which in turn translates into this becoming a lot more accountable kind of an ecosystem. So it's for everyone's good that the results are kind of stretched to the maximum. Hence, everyone is accountable in this kind of an ecosystem, and there is a lot more ownership shown by the employees than it's an all-hands approach. Similarly, the other element which kind of comes out of this is that there is significantly higher employee engagement, and the work content is naturally becoming much more alluring for employees, which means the employer, you guys and your organizations, can stay ahead of the job market trends, and you can truly attract the best of talent from the market to your organization for the better content of job that you have, and also act as a career development incubator for the employees, especially for some of these new collar jobs, which Rochelle mentioned about a little earlier. So employees can truly prepare themselves for these new cutting edge roles which are evolving, and that in turn translates SSO into a true talent pipeline for your organization, where some of really innovative and cutting edge thinking happens in your organization, and those individuals will further champion it across the bigger organization. And if all this goes as per plan, what essentially you will start seeing is that shared service centers, which are typically called as the transaction hubs, will slowly evolve into what is considered as innovation hubs of the organization. With our extremely young and tech-adept workforce, we can start truly giving enterprise solutions to the organization way beyond the transactional support which historically shared services has been giving. So which essentially would also mean a higher relevance of shared services within the C-suite, because C-suite normally follows where innovation happens within the organization, and shared services will also start becoming the hub for testing new generation solutions for the broader organization. The other importance of why it's important to do it now, that it's important that we pursue this opportunity ahead of the market, is that leading change and adopting technology is evolving to be one of the biggest leadership trait which is valued in the current economy. So as leaders, most of us will become highly regarded and valued within our organizations in the market as you start scaling up your skills on leading change and driving innovation within your organization. So we already spoke about innovative thinking. You will have that bench of innovative thinking culture within your organization, and also you will be starting to create new collar jobs ahead of the industry. So new collar jobs, just a brief on that, is like in the past we used to have white collar jobs and blue collar jobs, but now that the definitions of these jobs are changing so much based on the digital innovations and the robotics which we are seeing. So the new collar jobs are the new phase of jobs which we will be seeing in the world in the coming years ahead. Also, another major advantage of this is that embarking on this journey at this stage will also bring in the best of the talent which is in your own workforce. So I'm sure that the transactional nature of the work is kind of restricting many employees in your own organizations, but encouraging them to be more innovative and opening up all these tools and methodologies to employees will also get employees to start being more hands-on and engaged. I have this particular example of one individual about 5 years back when we were introducing innovative thinking and it as a cultural trait in one of the teams I was working with. This individual was almost on his way out because he was not fitting into our transactional nature of our organization. And he had multiple complaints from his supervisor due to lack of productivity. He was kind of going out of the script too often and so on. So we had performance concerns on this one individual. But once we exposed him into the whole innovative thinking and empowered this individual along with the broader organization with the tools, technology tools and so on, this person radically changed in a matter of weeks. And he became extremely hands-on. He was taking ownership on a lot of the new initiatives and ideas. He was kind of converting ideas into reality in a very interesting fashion. And fast forward, I was talking to this person's organizational head a few weeks back, and this individual in this 5 years time has had 3 promotions and today is leading a global project with about a $70+ million project. And this individual is considered as one of the top talent in this global organization of around 40,000 people. So that person truly bloomed and grew up thanks to the fact that we let his creativity out and empowered him with the right tools. And that kind of examples you will see a lot more in your organization if you truly empower your employees. And these traits and these individuals you can keep for the evolving new years when technology and adoption of technology becomes a lot more quicker and faster in our ecosystem. And also, moving now gives you an advantage when it's preparing the organization for the better, more jazzier facets of artificial intelligence, such as deep learning. When they come into the SSO ecosystem, you will have your data systems and processes much more ready, and SSO will be one of the organizations that will be leading this change within your organization. So that will be extremely powerful and impactful for everybody involved. Now looking at the different players in this journey. So who plays a part? Obviously leadership. I think leadership essentially has to lead this from the front. So to begin with, they essentially need to kind of build what I call as an innovation charter, which essentially lays down the vision of how shared services will play an active role in being the innovation hub of the entire enterprise. To build that vision, get the buy-in from the key stakeholders within the organization, and then as a next step, work on the HR-related preparedness. So prepare each leadership layer of the organization to effectively lead in this new way of thinking, this new cultural trait of innovation within the organization. So this will probably be one of the biggest challenges, to get leaders to start giving up the old ways of doing business and start embracing the new style of harvesting the expertise of their own employees. And finally, it is all about establishing the enabling framework. As I mentioned before, empowering employees becomes key. So also in a more structured fashion, building an enabling framework for employees to truly be at their innovative best, that becomes the other facet of the leadership responsibility. I've given some more content around these, which you can follow through in the downloadable material. So if I can just expand a little bit further on this enabling framework. So it's important that you define and identify the tools which we will be using, shortlist the methodologies and expertise on these methodologies as part of the framework, and most importantly, have an innovation support team working with the frontline employees in the operations to work very closely. So this will be a team of experts in methodology like Six Sigma and so on, and can be also experts with coding expertise and so on, who will essentially sitting with the employees, channel their creative energy and build some structure into how the initial ideas are being harvested and brought into reality. So building the innovation support team is a critical facet of this journey. So that is also a responsibility of the leadership. So 3 steps: building the vision and seeking buy-in for the vision, preparing the leadership team, every layer of the leadership team to be leading effectively in this new structure, and building the framework. So these would be the key responsibilities of the leadership team. And then customers. Customers, I mean the businesses or the functions who are outsourcing activity into the shared services organizations. So for them, years ago when activities moved into shared services, the idea was they can start focusing on their core focus areas. But in reality, things evolve in such a way that they still hands-on engage on a day-to-day basis with shared services organization. So it's time for them to rebuild their vision of how they can operate in this new modern 4th industrial revolution world, on how they can focus on their core focus areas, and how SSO can truly be a strategic partner in them reaching their strategic objectives. So they need to focus on their focus areas and stay away from the day-to-day of shared services world, but at the same time engage SSO as a strategic partner, especially when it comes to innovation and pushing the needle in their own worlds. And that said, they should also partner actively with the shared services in order to nurture and mentor and groom this culture within the shared services ecosystem. So it's a partnered approach where we need to work with the customer to ensure that the initial stage especially is a much more partnered approach in bringing that together. some more details as I mentioned before. So I just want to call out that areas where client organizations can leverage SSO as a strategic partner could be in the areas of process mining, business intelligence, and also somewhat like a strategic consultant when it comes to how, based on the insights from SSO, we can provide roadmaps into how they can expand their own priority areas. And the final part is obviously how we partner together. So here, as I mentioned, actively monitoring and partnering with the teams to kind of encourage an innovative thinking trait and also drive communication and alignment across the enterprise. It's important that we partner with our customers to communicate the new set of expectations from SSO with the broader organization so that the organization doesn't assume that SSO is doing this in isolation. It should be a partnered approach with the client organizations that we set the expectations correctly across the whole organization. And last but most importantly, employees. Employees play the most crucial part when it comes to any culture-related conversation. So here, essentially, the roles employees play is like, first of all, when they start being exposed to this whole conversation about innovation-based culture, is that they need to reflect a little bit about themselves to see what are their own personality traits which can be aligned better with this new culture. So that would be the first step they take. And then they need to also start looking at what are the new types of job roles which are emerging if they would be interested in pursuing themselves. So as I mentioned before, there's a lot of new collar jobs kind of emerging out there in the market. So employees need to start looking at how some of these new career paths can be of interest for them and what they would like to target for themselves. And then obviously once you do a self-reflection of current state and future state where you would like to get to, it's all about building skills to close the gap. So here the employers are expected to build a personal action plan, agree with HR and the leadership team in order to ensure a step-by-step approach on how they will upskill themselves, how they will contribute to the business goals in the process, and how they will contribute and be good citizens of this new culture of innovation. It's also expected of them to start being big change champions within their own ecosystem and promote innovation as a day-to-day trait within the operations ecosystem and make that a reality. So some more content out there, what kind of personal traits they need to attribute to and additional roles which comes in this new paradigm, and how the personal action plan should look like and so on. So those are some of the further thoughts which you need to kind of pursue deeper in order for you to essentially champion this within your ecosystem. Moving further, so the different stages of building a culture. So the first stage is essentially about building trust. So when it comes to building trust, we'll begin with employees. So employees truly need to kind of have this mindset shift from adherence to innovation, right? So that is the first step, because today it's a very compliance-based, adherence-based ecosystem which we have in most centers. So driving and encouraging employees to shift their mindset from adherence to innovation becomes the first step. And also getting employees to be familiar with the end-to-end processes and the bigger, broader context of their job, that becomes a part of the facet of the first stage. And this stage, it'll be also the time when employees get a better understanding of the digital toolkit which the leadership has signed up on, and having the early stage, experimenting with the digital toolkit is what is expected at this stage. Similarly, the leadership, here it's primarily about setting expectations externally within the organization as well as internally within the organization, and set the stage on the different steps involved in the journey and aligning most of the stakeholders onto this. Also about driving a communication campaign within the operations and within the organization so that every employee in the organization can relate to the new expectations and new behavioral traits, as well as how their performance will be managed, and also what kind of rewards await them for adopting and following the new style of operations. That will also the stage for the leadership to focus on infrastructure investments and also how those investments are yielding results with active performance monitoring. So that is the expectation from the leaders. And from the customers, the expectation at this stage would be essentially to provide more process expertise and contextual knowledge to the employees within SSO, and also initiate some level of ownership transfer of the bigger level process changes and innovation within their ecosystem. They need to be actively involved in early stage program mentoring because they bring a lot of historic expertise. So we do expect them to actively involve with the team members and encourage their program mentoring so that there is true success in the initial stages of the culture rollout. Stage 2, this is when the initial results have started coming in and there is some momentum across the organization. So here, I think you'll start seeing more employees getting engaged in the innovation process because typically success breeds success. So when you see some of the early adopters bringing some good success, now the employees will start looking at some of the early inroads in making innovation real into their own ecosystems and start copying some of those behaviors as well as some of the results into their own ecosystem, which will start seeing some results across multiple pockets of the organization. And this will also encourage employees to start being more bold with their change ideas and truly start having a confidence that, yes, change is possible, yes, we are able to lead the change and so on. So this becomes a scaling momentum-like moment for the employees. And so this will be the time when we will start exposing employees to more of market benchmarks and some of the emerging trends so that in the stage 1, we expose them more into end-to-end processes and so on. And in stage 2, we will start taking employees' exposure into more what happens in the market and emerging trends and so on, so that there is more clarity and more broader-based thinking which employees will get exposed to. And at this stage, the leadership, essentially what they will have to focus on is to kind of reset the expectation with, because when we start the journey, we would start with many different assumptions, but after stage 1, we will typically get the good flavor of where this journey will evolve into. So there will be a fair bit of resetting of expectations with stakeholders and sharing the initial results with the C-suite and so on to kind of get the whole organization more attuned to the reality of how things are progressing so that the next stage can be even more better planned and broader than what was originally expected. Also, this will be the time to focus a little bit more deeper into tactical HR planning, including labor mix and skills metrics. Here, what I mean is that you'll start seeing some of the early successes and some of the good behaviors some pioneers have started to showcase. You need to kind of incorporate these behaviors as the required behaviors for the future in your skills metrics and so on, and also identify the people who are resisting change and what kind of behavior do they exhibit, what are the behaviors we want to discourage, and call out those behavioral traits as something which does not have a role to play in the organization in the future. So we need to kind of be very clear to our employees on what is encouraged versus what is not, and also prepare our own leadership teams to start operating based on the new labor mix and skills metrics. So these are some of the decisions which would be taken by leadership in stage 2. And from a customer standpoint, I think this would be also the stage where customer starts releasing more control from the classic approach and be less involved in day-to-day oversight and start evolving into what we call as governance 2.0, wherein which they have access to their information through process mining and real-time dashboards, which requires, and they have adequate trust in the operations to not wanting to do a day-to-day oversight of what happens in the operating ecosystem. So that's essentially scaling momentum, which is stage 2. And the stage 3 is all about staying at the peak. The assumption is that stage 2 will truly take you to the peak. And staying in the peak calls for a totally different style of leadership skills and focus. At this stage, the employees will start evolving into building solutions beyond shared services into truly end-to-end organization at an enterprise level. Remember, in the first stage, they got exposed to end-to-end. In the second stage, they got exposed to what happens in the market. In the third stage, they're starting to champion solutions, end-to-end solutions within the enterprise. So that is truly scaling employees to a totally different level than what we are used to. This will also be the stage when some of the employees will start becoming experts in some unique tools and methodologies. In the previous stages, they have been using multiple tools at the same time. At this stage, they start being expert in unique tools. And they can also start monitoring the market and start seeing what are some of the more emerging trends there. And our own employees with these mini technology councils can test and sample some of the more advanced technologies evolving in the marketplace and bring that back into our ecosystems. So I have some interesting examples on that as well. If we have time, we'll go through that. And beyond that, from a leadership standpoint, at this stage, once innovation is being driven in such an active fashion, we can expect the expectation from IT teams to be much different for SSO, and also sign new service level agreements with the customer organizations around, especially around innovation. There will be also a lot of focus on restructuring the organization based on the new realities of what kind of a value organization SSO has become. And the leaders of SSO at this stage need to really engage with the pioneers in the industry and stay each other updated on some of the cutting edge solutioning happening in the industry so that they do not lose momentum. Because once you reach the peak, people might tend to want to rest on their laurels, but this is essentially encouraging them to essentially keep the pace on an ongoing basis so that they do not lose out at a later stage. And at this stage, essentially, customers, they should be, at this stage, fully be able to focus on their core areas and leverage SSO as an enabling partner. And at this stage, we can also expect the pace of SSOs to be much faster than most of the rest of the organization. So we might need to also start looking at customer organizations starting to host roles within their organization to speed up their own organization to keep up with the shared services pace. This is completely opposite of what happens in many shared services today, where in which customers hire roles to kind of help shared services to keep up to their pace. We are looking at a future in a stage 3 of innovation culture. We will have customers struggling to keep pace with the pace at which the SSO organizations will be innovating and changing. So that will be a very beautiful, colorful future state where innovation can truly take us to. Some of the hurdles and considerations which you might need to look at. I think the biggest hurdle will be that how do you engage a highly disengaged workforce? So I think this will definitely be a big hurdle in most organizations. So I would encourage people to hire consultants in HR who are specializing in employee engagement and turnarounds and so on in order to truly drive this change within the organization. So that will become highly critical for us to kind of drive. And followed by that, it's also important that the enabling team, which is kind of driving these innovations within the shop floor, they are staffed with some of the best experts in the industry. Some of these skills like Six Sigma, coding, automation, all are becoming highly competitive roles in the market. So it might be tempting for many of us to kind of settle on these roles with lesser profiles, but I would highly encourage you not to settle for these lower profiles for these highly critical roles. You need to really get best of the brains into these roles, because we've had examples of some of these roles yielding returns of investment within 3 quarters. So typically these roles should give you return on investment within about 4 to 6 quarters. So it's highly good return on investment for most of these roles. So I do encourage you to kind of go shake out your comp and ben bandwidth a little bit to get the right profiles hired for these enabling roles. These are like coding, automation, black belts, and so on. Another very, very critical element which everyone needs to be careful about here is that there should be a very robust governance on coding, writing IT codes, building bots and so on. The last thing you want is bot mushrooms, that is codes being written all over the place and some codes acting weirdly with contradicting some other initiatives and so on. So there has to be a very clear governance on which projects are being sponsored, which projects are being executed, which are given green flag, which are under monitoring and so on, so that there is no cases of kind of cowboy mushrooms and bots floating around in this ecosystem. So it's very important that the governance on coding is managed in a very, very hands-on fashion. And when we talk about innovative thinking and driving projects, it doesn't mean that everyone starts coding and creating stuff without any umbrella oversight. So oversight becomes very critical here. And then obviously investing further in SSO. So many times there is challenge getting the required funding for this. So my typical recommendation for organization is to retain the cost savings within SSO organizations when clients will benefit from better quality and cycle times, and reinvest these savings into new tools, as well as in revising the compensation structure of the organization. Because people in an innovative culture, especially the change champions, they will be highly sought after by the market. So if you do not change their compensation structure and kind of reflect their value to the organization, your competitors will do that. So it's very important for you to drive this ahead of the market and improve your skills. And lastly, quick other points, keep iterating the model through the initial stages to make sure you get a good quality final stage evolving out. Many organizations, even though I kind of quite generically started talking about shared service SSO as a one unique function, I can also imagine that some centers are more mature than other centers, some teams are more mature than other teams and so on. So my recommendation is to kind of pilot these kind of cultures in modestly mature teams so that you can harvest some of the early successes and then you can roll out things in a much more broader basis. And it's also important that shared services do some peripheral investment into value-added roles, such as building internal consulting competencies and some very sensitive roles, such as regulatory expertise and so on within SSO, so that the borders, how you market these expertise outwards to the organization and how you keep things secure is also adequately managed and overseen. So that's essentially a lot about culture which I want to cover for today. So that's the last slide. If you have further questions or would like to share or exchange some ideas with me further, feel free to reach out in any of these ways I've called out here. So Rochelle, are you back in the line?
I'm back, and wow, that was a lot of great information, and so thanks so much for all of that. We do have a slide deck available, and as Sudhir mentioned, there's some more additional supplemental information in that also that he didn't get through all of it today. He put some bonus items for you at the end of that, so be sure to download the slide deck. Let me go ahead and get started on some of the questions. One of these is way back to when you were talking about the technology landscape, and you mentioned process mining and process discovery. Those are kind of terms people are hearing a lot, and there's a question if you can kind of talk a little bit about the difference between process mining and process discovery. I want to say that maybe was around slide 5, if you maybe want to switch back and perhaps bring that up so people can see the reference to that.
Yes, sure. So I think I'm not a big expert of process discovery, but I'll share what I know about process discovery. So process mining is essentially connecting our process, especially the back-end logs of these processes in such a way that we are able to clearly understand, relate to what happens in the operations and what happens in the back end of all the transactions. So for example, if there is one invoice which comes into our ecosystem, which are the places where it had to be slowed down, which are the places where it had to loop through multiple circles, and which are the places where it was able to flow through in a very cohesive fashion. So this is an insight which we are able to gain from process mining. That is going deeper into the metadata of all the transactions which happen within an organization and bringing that into what I call as almost a real-time view, a process flow-like view, in which we can see how many invoices are flowing through a AP process, or how many orders are flowing through an order management process, or how many purchase orders are going through a procurement process. So how individual transaction flows through the entire depth of a process is what process mining shows us, based on real data collected typically by the system logs from SAP, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and solutions like that. So the metadata is used for getting this data rather than pulling reports or asking employees to make an estimate and so on. So process mining gives the pulse of the real system on a real-time basis. That's what process mining is about. Process discovery is essentially a little bit, from my understanding, the output of process mining, which kind of tells you what are the different steps involved, which steps require more manual processing versus which steps are easier to follow through and so on. So for me, process discovery is a little bit of a result of process mining, while there are some other tools which like one of the tools which were shared yesterday, in which we spoke about how you can do process discovery at a desktop data entry level. So process discovery can be done across multiple levels. It can be brainstorming sessions. It can be data capture at front end, like a screen capture tool, or it can be in the back end through process mining, in which we look at the metadata and map the process backwards. So that's my understanding of process discovery. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert in process discovery, but process mining is essentially getting the crux of how the process evolves through looking at the back end ERP data, or the source system data. Hope that was a little bit helpful.
Yeah, I think it was Himanshu who asked that question. And just to let you know, Himanshu, if you happen to miss it, on day one of the conference, we had a whole session on process discovery. That was the third session of the day, and the first session of the day was on process mining. So if you do need further information, look for those links to the recordings from day one sessions, and you'll get a bit more detail there as well. So Michael has an interesting question. He would like to know, how does a firm manage the complexity of implementing a changing culture whilst still being constrained by the time commitments to supporting daily activities?
Yes, so I think this is definitely a challenging situation for us to kind of manage. So there are different ways we need to kind of look at it. So one approach which I have applied in some of my earlier teams is that we try to kind of seek individuals who are kind of willing to carve out some time of their day-to-day in order to be involved in more process-oriented or creative tasks like workshops and being exposed to some of these learnings and so on. So what we did with some of those individuals is like we try to do some load balancing with those employees. In certain pockets, we also had some overstaffing. So we had opportunities to get some interns hired into a process for a short period of time. So we try to do some overstaffing in individual cases, but most of the time it has been trying to kind of harvest employees' interest in kind of mixing their day with a little bit more creative tasks and encouraging them to do something beyond their usual, which also yielded a really good returns and results. So we've also seen that when we start opening up some real fun opportunities for our employees, we've seen productivity also going up. So people starting to finish up their day-to-day tasks in a little bit more quicker and faster mode, and making time to go and engage in some of the more creative tasks which we are kind of giving them. However, that becomes a little bit more challenging in roles such as call centers and so on, wherein which all employees need to be live during X number of hours during the day in these sessions. So it does require at times some flexibility from the employees to embark on this journey. But what we've seen is when we roll it out in pilots and in waves and certain ecosystems, in the second wave, people are much more interested and engaged in kind of putting some personal time in to involve in some of these initiatives as well, because in the end, it's all about improving their skills and improving their work content. So we've seen different levels of engagement across different employees in the past when we've tested this in many pockets. I hope that helps a little bit.
I think it did. And if not, certainly, Michael, feel free to ask add additional comments. Two similar questions here, so I'll ask him, is talking about companies, who are doing this well, examples of where you've seen culture of innovation gone live and worked effectively.
Okay, so that's a little bit interesting question. So I would like to approach it in different styles. So culture is typically associated to a group of people from a particular community. So one place where culture of innovation seems to be very vibrant across past many decades is Silicon Valley. There are so many companies which come from the same ecosystem, and a lot of innovation seems to be happening from that part of the world. So I was actually referring to this in one of my recent conversations, that one of the reasons why Silicon Valley seemed to be so full of innovative ideas and energy was based on some of the initial culture which many companies which formed Silicon Valley between 1940s and 1970s had. So one of their cultural pillars was that all tools are to be kept unlocked. So what it essentially meant that any employee in the company could go and play around with any of the tools available in the company. And this was a true game changer for people who worked in Silicon Valley in those forming years, because there were these virtually extremely expensive computing power and so on, which is available for them to play around with. That was extremely powerful. So opening up tools truly encourages innovation. That's what we can learn from Silicon Valley. And looking at some unique companies per se in the broader scale, I think we all hear about Google and Amazon being highly innovative companies, and Google having their personal project approach which encourages a lot of innovation within their ecosystem. And in Amazon also, any employee from a pick and pack employee in one of their warehouse, if that individual has an idea, he is encouraged to kind of bring it down into their global idea management platform, in which they have a very structured way of driving how an idea can be mentored from even from a warehouse employee to a super user or supervisor in the organization, how their ideas can be mentored and driven. So they have truly mastered the art of how to capture ideas, sponsor the idea, and bring it to real life and real solutions. So Amazon would be the second example I can give. One of the companies which has really gone active in this field in the recent years, especially in the last 15 months or so, is Novartis. It's a global pharmaceutical major, so it's a huge company. Their new CEO is also trying to build innovation as a culture across the whole organization. So that will be quite interesting, because typically pharma companies are very conservative in nature. So getting innovation as a cultural trait in a full, I think, almost 100,000 employee pharma organization, that's really calling for a tall order. So Novartis is another company which is kind of driving a little deeper in that space. And my own personal experience with some of the companies which I've been exposed to, like Hewlett-Packard, Becton Dickinson, and so on, they had really good innovation engine within their organization. So this was visible in some pockets in these organizations. And I've also seen companies like Conduent and Accenture within this ecosystem, SSO ecosystem, in certain pockets being quite active when it comes to truly encouraging innovation and driving a culture of innovation within their organization. So some of these organizations more limited and in silos, while others like Google, Amazon, across the whole organization, and especially companies, most companies which operate out of Silicon Valley, especially those headquartered out of Silicon Valley, which formed out of that culture of innovation, they all have innovation as a cultural trait within their organization. So that's the way I would look at it. I hope that answered the question.
That gave brilliant, not only answered it, gave at least 5 different examples that I was counting there. And so I think that was wonderful. I love the whole play with any tool that you want in the toolbox. And that there could be no better statement as far as the culture of innovation and people to trust and encourage that. Well, it's already, it's 59 minutes where we have had such a wonderful discussion. I feel very much like I want to go out and create the world, get a box of crayons out and be really innovative. So thanks to here for all of that information. And as we get ready to close out here, just a quick reminder, you see on the screen a lot of different ways to get in touch with you here. You can also just use, if you go out to the bio section on the right-hand side of your screen, use the social buttons there and connect if you want to continue on, talk a little bit about what's going and the struggles you may be having doing with your organization. We really do like to engage and learn from you, so please do that. Also, if you haven't had a chance, so there's so much good stuff coming out from this World Economic Forum annual meeting. I know here both and I have been glued to the videos that they've been releasing. So one of those, it does touch on this whole concept of new collar workers, and it's in the YouTube link that I've sent you. So please do go ahead and take a look at that. And also download the slides. There's about 3 or 4 more additional slides that you didn't have here, and a couple other pieces of material, references and graphs that I think you might find useful as you're putting your programs together. So you'll see that in the slide deck that's downloadable. Tomorrow you'll also receive an email with the link to the recordings. You can share this with your colleagues. Feel free to take advantage and use that recording to have an all-hands meeting or maybe a lunch and learn or something like that. This is one of the many resources that this is good for. Sue here, thanks so much for your time. I hope you had a good day sharing all the information there. Did you enjoy the audience?
Absolutely. I think I'm happy that I could manage to go through most of the content in this time because it was quite a challenge to fit that into a less than 16-minute session. So I'm glad that I was able to cover most of it, and I hope this inspires the audience to make innovation a cultural reality in your organizations. And feel free to reach out if you would like to go deeper into this topic with me.
Fantastic. So with that, we hope to see you all back tomorrow. I just have a quick update or announcement. We're going to actually have 3 sessions and my session tomorrow. We just had someone come in with a wonderful piece of information that we're going to share. So we've added additional sessions that some of you may not have seen before. That one's going to be at 8 a.m. tomorrow. So you'll receive some more emails tonight with the updated agenda for tomorrow. So 8 a.m., 9:30, 11 o'clock, all of those in U.S. Eastern Time. And then once that 11 o'clock session wraps up, immediately following that, I'm going to be doing my Chairwoman's Conference summary, about 15 minutes just to give you some tidbits and highlights and takeaways from the entire week. So I hope that you'll join us in for that. Thanks to those of you who are listening to the live session. A special thank you to those of you who are listening to the recorded version of this. And on that note, this now concludes this webinar session.